listening to Blue Jays Nation Radio with Cam Lewis and Tyler Yaremchuk, a member of the Nation network of podcasts and delivered by DoorDash.
Episode 123.
Ding dong.
Ding dong. Shout out to DoorDash. We are back. First episode in like a month.
Because nothing's happening.
Literally nothing.
Our off-season plan for creating content was when the Blue Jays do something, the next day we'll find a time, we'll talk about it and put it in a podcast. But the Blue Jays have done sweet fuck all this winter. All they've done is trade a good hitter for a relief pitcher.
What'd you want us to do? Do a podcast 2 weeks ago and talk about the rumblings?
That's what I mean. It's like, well, we could have talked about them bringing back Vinny Capra on a minor league deal after non-tendering him. But that's probably the most exciting thing we've seen in the past month-ish.
Yeah, there's not a lot going on right now for the Blue Jays, but that in itself has become a bit of a story. We were going to record one of these yesterday. We didn't. In that time, Brandon Nimmo re-ups with the New York Mets. It's a mammoth deal. And before we get into Nimmo specifically, Coom, it is worth noting we're seeing a bit of a trend, whether it's Bogaerts, whether it's Trey Turner or Nimmo, where it feels like teams, are they not adding on years to stay below the CBT threshold this year? That feels like what's happening here.
Yeah, the teams that are going above the luxury tax, what they're just doing now is they're making the contracts longer and stretching them out so they can get them into kind of like, think about it in hockey terms. It's a lower salary cap hit.
It's like teams were doing this early in the NHL salary cap days. It feels like
Kovalchuk deal.
It feels like we're almost in that same time with baseball where teams are like, oh, this is an easy way to skirt around this. We'll just give a guy 11 years knowing damn well he's not going to play all 11.
Yeah, exactly. So the hope with what teams are trying to do now is you have something like Bogaerts. It's 11 years, and then you can lower your average annual value and try and keep yourself below the luxury tax. But a lot of these teams that are doing it are ones that are just blowing it out of the water, right? Like the Phillies are spending big money. The Padres are spending big money. The Mets are spending big money. I mean, that's just once you blow by it, you're just so far gone. You're just going to keep going.
Yeah, I guess. Nimmo is the big name that we talked about this when they dealt Hernandez. It was like, hey, you moved on from Teoscar. Okay, tough pill to swallow, fan favorite, all that stuff. You got a reliever, and now you have potentially an extra $14 million that you can throw around. And Nimmo was kind of viewed as the guy who should cost in that range a little more, but would be a great fit for this Jays team because he can play center field. You can move Springer to a corner spot, and he gives them what they don't have. He checks all the boxes they need checked. How disappointed are you that they didn't find a way to land this guy? Or do you look at that contract and go, bullet dodged?
I'm not going to sit here and worry about contracts or dodging the bullet because I do firmly believe that Rogers can be right up there with the Mets. And I mean, the Padres are in there. The Phillies are in there. There's no reason the Jays can't be spending like that. So I'm not going to view this like we're talking about hockey and there's a hard salary cap that the Blue Jays have to adhere to. I understand the front office does ultimately have to adhere to the number that Rogers will allow them to spend. But going past that, Rogers themselves should have the Blue Jays be in the mix to be a top 5 or 3 payroll. So I'm not going to sit here and worry, like Brandon Nimmo is getting paid more than George Springer 2 years later. Like, who gives a shit? It's not my money. It's Rogers' money. And where the Jays are at now is it's now or never. If you're not going to, augment this group, then you're not going to beat the Houston Astros. You're not going to beat the LA Dodgers. You couldn't beat the Seattle Mariners. Like, there's a ways to go for this team. And if Rogers isn't willing to pony up, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It feels like a lot more this offseason. And again, I'm not sitting here being critical because I think they've done a good job adding to the team and adding in free agency. And I'm well aware that there's big contracts coming down the pipe. They're going to probably have to sign Bowen Vlad, Alek Manoah. Yeah. But it doesn't feel this winter like it did the previous two. The previous two, it was the Jays were in the mix for this guy. The Jays were in the mix for that guy. The Jays were in the mix. The Jays were in the mix. The Jays are kicking towers. The Jays are kicking tires. The Jays are doing this. But this winter, it's felt more small market for the Jays. It's felt more like, they're having conversations and they have a bunch of plans. We'll see what happens later on in the offseason. We'll see who misses out on getting their guy and then we can make a trade. But now it seems like everyone's going and getting their guy and the Jays are falling behind. And what's going to wind up happening is everyone knows they're so desperate for an outfielder and a third or fourth starter that they're going to have to wildly overpay. And that's just the shitty thing is if you're not willing to spend money in free agency to compete with the big guys, that's what you wind up having to do. And that's what it's looking like now.
The other thing that kind of fell apart on top of the Nemo deal, and this one was, well, wildly disappointing from a Jays perspective, but also for our boy BK, who had firmly planted himself in they need to get Lars Nootbaar or Dylan Carlson camp. And to see the Cardinals go just sign Wilson Contreras, and then the reports came out that they were never even really offering their outfielders in these discussions. They were offering relievers and pitching arms. The Cardinals one was a move I had a lot of hope in. And I was like, that feels like a deal the Jays could turn into a slam dunk victory when you factor in Jansen for Nootbaar, Hernandez for relief out. Boom, you got better with those two moves. I was more disappointed in Contreras signing with St. Louis than I was in Nemo signing with the Mets.
Yeah, that definitely took like a big option off the table from the Jays, but that's kind of that's the nature of the beast with so many of us as we come up with these ideas of hypothetical trades that just make sense. There wasn't really ever a tangible report saying, hey, the Blue Jays and Cardinals front office, these people are all chatting. They have there's speculation to be made that something tangible is happening. It's just us roster baiting. It's just us being like, hey, look, the Cardinals need a catcher. Hey, look, the Jays need an outfield. And we just made something up. And it made sense to us, but there's no guarantee that the St. Louis Cardinals had any interest in any of Toronto's three catchers. Maybe they don't value them as much as we do, or maybe they have an extremely high value on their outfielders and they don't want to get rid of them. It was like with the Juan Soto trade. Everyone's like, oh, these prospects, they're this and that. Like this team has so many better prospects. We don't know which organization values what anymore.
Yeah.
Modern baseball is so different now with this kind of stuff. You look for a certain skill set that your analytics department can, or your coaching staff or whatever can get some guy to figure out because he has, a great spin rate horizontally or something like that. It's all just so different now.
Yeah. Episode 123 of the pod is brought to you by our friends at DoorDash, where you can use the promo code GameDay25, get yourself 25% off and no delivery fees on your first order of $15 or more when you download the DoorDash app. This team absolutely, Coombsy, cannot come out of this offseason without adding a significant outfielder to make up for what you lost in Teoscar Hernandez. And not make up for Teoscar Hernandez in the sense that you're going to get 30 to 35 home runs from someone. That'd be great. But when you look at the names that are out there, unlikely, impossible, I would say, to find someone with that kind of potential.
Yeah, it's the names kind of left on the market now for free agents. If the Jays want to bring somebody in, is the biggest name is what? Michael Brantley. And that's kind of a tough one. We all know the Jays front office likes and is familiar with Michael Brantley because they came close to signing him a couple years ago when they signed George Springer. The deal was reported to be done, but he winds up going back to Houston on the 2-year deal. Brantley, of course, Cleveland, when Shapiro and Atkins were still there, acquired him as part of the return of the CC Sabathia trades. This is a guy they know well. Andrew Benintendi went to the Yankees at the trade deadline. He's a free agent. Didn't have a spectacular season. The Jays were in on him ahead of the trade deadline, but wound up, as I said, going to New York. Then there's Kevin Kiermaier, a name that we all know very well, has spent his entire career at the Tampa Bay Rays. Doesn't hit particularly well, but is an elite defender, kind of injury prone now. Joey Gallo was, for a few years there, one of the better power hitters in the league, but has completely fallen off a cliff after getting traded to the Yankees a couple years ago. And
he kind of turned it around for a little when he got moved to the Dodgers, but it didn't last long.
It lasted like 12 seconds. He had, a handful of good games and then kind of fell off again. Maybe he plays in a calmer market than New York or LA. He gets back to it. Or maybe it's just someone whose huge swing has been exposed. And then there's Jurickson Profar. He kind of fits the mold of what the Jays like, this front office likes, with those guys that play multiple positions, the Whit Merrifield types. He's played left, right, and center field for the Padres, and he also played third base. So that makes some sense, switch hitter, but none of these guys are as good as Teoscar Hernandez, unfortunately. So if this is going to be your replacement, you better hope the Jays are signing one of the best pitchers left out there or making a huge trade for a really good player, because it would be a pretty lame offseason if they went ahead and trade Teoscar for a reliever and a prospect and then just sign some ho-hum reclamation project.
Like Profar, yeah.
Yeah, like a Profar or a Gallo or a Kiermaier. It's just, it feels lateral at best. If everything goes well, it could be lateral. And that's not where we were a month ago when we were like, oh, you know what? The Teoscar trade sucks, but it makes sense. And it opens up a bunch of room for them to do this. And they just don't do anything.
Like, even if it was Bellinger, who was another name that I was disappointed to see sign elsewhere, he got the 1 year, $17 million deal, right?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. That guy, the shift is going away. We kind of read into his numbers away from the shift. And I was like, oh, Bellinger feels like a name who could come and pop at the Rogers Center, right? Gives you good defense as well. I was really intrigued by that. They don't end up getting Bellinger either. Another thing, too, is a team like the Red Sox went out and bolstered their bullpen. Look at who they've signed, right? Kenley Jansen, Yoeli Rodriguez, Chris Martin. They went and got some big bullpen names, and the Jays are sitting there with the one guy they picked up, Eric Swanson, in the Teoscar deal, and nothing else to show for it. It's been a disappointing week to be a Jays fan.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, to be fair, though, I mean,
still a lot of offseason left.
We're not going to, it's not like this is the spring training preview episode. We're like, oh man, the Jays have done nothing and it's March. No, there's still time. And you throw back to a few off seasons ago. It was the off season after 2019 season when they made their first big free agent splash. The Hyunjin Ryu deal came out of nowhere after Zach Wheeler had signed with the Phillies. And Zach Wheeler was kind of the big name we all hoped. Oh, hey, if the Jays decide to pony up some cash in free agency, Zach Wheeler would be a great ad. Zach Wheeler signs with the Phillies. Everyone's pissed off. Oh, man, the biggest ad this season is going to be Chase Anderson. So that's what it was at the time. It looked like a joke. Yeah. And they went and signed Hyunjin Ryu, and it came out of nowhere. And it wasn't even really a name where you had been hearing, oh, there's a bunch of rumblings where the Jays are interested in Ryu. It just kind of happened. So, I mean, the best name probably left now that Nemo is signed is probably a pitcher. It's probably Rodon. And we haven't heard much about the Jays being in on Rodon, but if they can do the Hyunjin Ryu thing and come out of nowhere and add that, then that's great.
We also have heard the contrary, right? It's not like we haven't heard anything, but we're hearing that, like, hey, the front office seems pretty happy with Manoah, Gosman, Barrios as their 3. They're looking to add a 4, and then they're going to let Mitch White and whoever be their 5 kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or they'll bring back a guy like Stripling or whatever. But we're not hearing a ton about, oh no, they're hungry for an impact arm. We're just not.
No, all the names we had kind of heard about were more back end ones. The only one where it seemed to be the most smoke, where it was like they're actively engaged in something, not just reaching out and chatting and exchanging pleasantries like it usually is, was Kyle Gibson, kind of a back end around 5 ERA starter who wound up signing with the Baltimore Orioles. So that's the one guy they've been kind of close on. Actually, another thing to bring up now, given what pitchers are earning on the market, does it not look a little strange now that they didn't offer Ross Stripling the qualifying offer? You think 1 year, 20 mil seems okay for Stripling right now?
When you look at the other deals getting signed, it's kind of like he would. I don't know if he would have signed it.
Yeah,
so you would have just gotten yourself a free pick, or would it have hurt his value so much that he would have signed it? And the Jays actually don't view him as a $20 million arm. That's entirely possible as well. I don't know. Yeah, maybe that is weird.
I don't know. Just something that just randomly came to mind as I was talking about like names the Jays are trying to sign who aren't as good as Ross Stripling. And I'm thinking Kyle Gibson and what they would have been comfortable offering him. Are you just better keeping Stripling around on the 1 year deal?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Cole Hamels.
Oh, Christ. Yeah.
What a weird story that is.
Yeah, that's really strange. He hasn't pitched since 2020? Only pitched a handful of innings that year.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. That seemed like one of those things where like an agent reached out to an insider and it's like, hey man, like Cole really wants to pitch next year. Like, can you do me a solid and tweet out that teams are interested in him? It's like, okay, I'll do you the solid.
Yeah, I have a hard time imagining. He's got to be like 40 by now, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
At that point, go and sign Cole Hamels, bring in David Price too. He hasn't technically retired yet.
Cole Hamels is 38.
There you go. Sign Cole Hamels and David Price, 2 battle-tested starters, a couple of lefties. Or Yusei Kikuchi in the pen. There's your Andrew Miller.
It seems like the vibe I'm getting here from the last 10 minutes of this conversation is the Jays making a significant free agent ad a free agent ad that can be really impactful is getting slimmer and slimmer by the day. But could they maybe be in on a trade target? We'll talk about that after we take a quick break. Coombsy, the name everyone wants to talk about is Brian Reynolds from the Pittsburgh Pirates. Take us through the latest with Reynolds, because he wants out of Pittsburgh. He does not want to be a Pirate next season. So he is clearly available.
Yeah, so that's interesting. They came out with a report in the past week or so saying Brian Reynolds had requested a trade from the Pirates. And it's a little surprising because after the August trade deadline this season, he openly said he was happy he didn't get traded. He didn't want that to happen. I mean, things can change quickly. The Pirates are very bad. I don't think there's many players who are tremendously thrilled to be involved in that environment. But for whatever reason, Brian Reynolds at that time was saying that. How much he meant that, who knows? But apparently he wants a trade now. This is a player who's a switch hitter. He's an outfielder. The bat is the big part of what you'd be getting here. He's been an excellent hitter for Pittsburgh in the past. He was on the All-Star team in 2021, put up a 912 OPS. The OPS declined a little bit this year to 807, but still very good.
Very good.
When he came into the league, he was fine defensively, but his defense has apparently declined over the past few seasons.
Maybe he just stopped giving a shit because Pittsburgh sucks.
Yeah, honestly. I mean, like they got a huge center field out there. It's a big cave, kind of like Kansas City. It's not an easy place to defend. Maybe, who knows what it is. But this wouldn't be the kind of addition where you're like, yeah, we're getting a huge bat and a huge defensive upgrade. It almost just kind of seems like here's Teoscar Hernandez, but a switch hitter and a little bit younger and more years of control. Because, we saw Teoscar Hernandez go in center field a few times. It's possible. It's something you're allowed to do. He can get the job done, but by no stretch of the imagination was he a good everyday center fielder. And I think that's kind of where you're at with Reynolds. It's a good bat, but not the perfect fit. But where we're at right now with the Jays is there might not be a perfect fit. You might have to just find something that's fine.
Then the issue is with Reynolds is you're getting something that's not a perfect fit and you're also sacrificing in the trade as well. Like he's going to take legitimate future assets / prospects to bring this guy in. This isn't like like Bellinger. Just pony up the extra $2 million and bring him in now. Like this will take you'll have to get a little creative.
And it's a difficult trade avenue to go down because the person you're negotiating with is Ben Cherington, who used to be involved with this Blue Jays front office. So he knows who this front office covets, who they're maybe comfortable trading, and he knows the prospects involved. Mm-hmm. So, and then again, further to that, the point I was saying earlier when I was ranting about this is everyone kind of knows they're desperate. So your bargaining position isn't exactly fantastic.
I think the flip side of that, though, with like Sherrington and the Pirates specifically, could there maybe not be an angle of like he's more comfortable trading with the Jays because he knows those prospects well? Like he would be, if he's like, all right, you're giving me X, X, and X. I know these guys inside and out. I know I'm not getting screwed here.
Well, maybe that's the other way around is he knows something the Jays don't about a certain guy and he ends up fleecing them. Though that doesn't really seem like the kind of thing the Pirates ever really do. You go back to the Chris Archer trade, specifically the one they did with Tampa, winds up being an all-time bad one. Now that wasn't Sherrington, so that's a bit of a different animal. But I mean, if you can point to the last time the Pittsburgh Pirates made a good transaction, I would be interested to see.
Fair. They also don't need catchers, right? And
no, they don't. They're number one prospects at catcher, so you have to get a third team in the mix.
You either have to get a third team in or you're moving from parts of your pool that aren't catching related. And what are you going to do there? Are you moving Ricky Tiedemann?
That's the shitty thing is so you're the Jays now and you're wanting to get an impact player through trade. But your number one and number two prospects are players who could help your roster this year. Like if you trade Moreno, we saw him up last year. He didn't play that many games. He didn't contribute significantly, but he looks like he's right there. Like it's not inconceivable to think, this guy's a full-time major leaguer in 2023. And then everyone saw Tiedemann just dominate the minor leagues and go through 3 levels. And again, it's not remotely inconceivable that just like with Alek Manoah, he makes 4 starts in AAA Buffalo. And we're like, time to bring this guy up. He just dominated AAA and then he just starts. Yeah. So, I mean, like there's such a risk with trading one of those 2 guys. I mean, I'm not saying that they necessarily need to be involved in the trade, but those are your 1 and your 2. And that's who other teams are going to be asking for if you want an impact player. And that's what's so frustrating about this whole thing. That's what's so disappointing about them not finding something good in the free agent market is because being put into that situation where you have to make a trade makes your life so much more difficult. But hey, last year, right before the start of spring training, they go out and trade for Matt Chapman. And I don't think anybody misses anyone that was sent to Oakland in that deal.
I don't know, man. My Kirby Snead jersey just sits unworn.
Yeah, it was who was even involved in that trade? Like,
who was that? Kevin Smith.
Kendall
like
Graveman.
The most forgettable name for a human to have in general. Apologies to all Kevin Smiths out there, but like
very generic.
Yeah.
Sean Nolan, Kendall Graveman. Or that's the Donaldson trade.
Yeah.
Who knows anymore, man? It's the same trade twice. It's insane that happened.
Do you think there's any part of the Jays missing out on free agency that's CBT related?
Well, Shapiro said, and this is circling back to right at the start of the winter meetings, was that he says payroll is rising in a way that corresponds with our team and our success and our expectation, which is to be championship caliber. We're not a team that functions without a budget. Every team has one, so we've certainly got limits, but the support and the growth of that payroll is unprecedented in the history of the franchise, and it continues to be very strong from ownership. The CBT, those are my words, I'm just paraphrasing here, is not an obstacle for us. It will not limit us. We'll have a budget and a budget that will limit to, but the CBT is not what is going to set our budget, is what Shapiro said 3 days ago.
Let me tee you up for this then. Do players not want to sign in Canada?
Well, Alec Manoah said otherwise.
I loved that response from the big man.
That was great. That was fantastic.
Yeah, if you missed it on Twitter, there was a tweet sent out by Kevin Go.
I don't know who that is.
I have no clue who he is.
Verified account, or did he pay for his fucking badge? Looks like
he's got 80,000 followers, but
it just kind of looks like the kind of guy who paid for a badge. But
I've honestly never heard of this guy's name, but he said, starting to think MLB players really don't like Canada. Wow. Either that or somebody has Ross Atkins locked in a trunk regarding the Jays' lack of activity. Manoah quote tweeted it, and he said, being the only team that represents an entire nation is a blessing, especially an entire country that is passionate about all their sports teams. And Toronto being a very diverse and fun city and fun city to live and play in is amazing too. It's a beautiful opportunity for all of us with an exclamation point. Love them. Yeah, that's fantastic from Manoah. That's a great comment. He presses all the right buttons, knowing how to be like the most likable player. But circling back to the original comment, it's, it made sense a couple off seasons ago when we were like deep into the heart of the pandemic and the borders were all closed and it was, chaos. You'd see a player not want to come here because they can't, visit their family during the season or that kind of thing, or they're going to have to be living out of a suitcase like with Dunedin and Buffalo in that 2021 season. But even despite all of that, they went and had Springer, they had Gosman, they trade for Matt Chapman. There's no issue there. It's not like he's after the trade being like, oh, I have to go to Canada. No one said this. This isn't happening. Yeah. It's just clickbait. It's trolling. It's being annoying. No one thinks this way. I don't buy that at all, especially because like to shit on ourselves a little bit here. It's not like it's Edmonton. It's not right. Like it's not like some Toronto, it's not like some guy who's born and raised in some warm weather climate like the Dominican gets his agent calling him and being like, hey man, your only offer is Winnipeg or Edmonton or Saskatoon. And you have to go live there in the winter. Like it's Toronto in the summer. Then these guys go home when it's cold. I don't know. I think that whole narrative is so tired, and it's not like Canada's viewed as a third world country. No. Some people might prefer it to the US. So the narrative that people love, players don't want to play in Canada. A lot of these players aren't even from the States. They don't give a shit.
No, it's just a lazy thing. It's annoying. I think it's just to get a reaction. And I think it's just so easily dispelled with the amount of players that have come here recently and the positive things we hear from the players who do come here. Like think about all the former Jays, like Vernon Wells has talked extensively about how much he loved playing in Toronto. Of course, Gibby, like all those guys, there's so many former Jays who are involved. Ricky Romero, he's a guy from California. And
he loves flying back. And he says it on Twitter when he has a chance to fly back to Toronto. He loves it. The one example I always run back to in this, and it's the Kyle Lowry thing, right? Where he was mad he got traded here. Then he spent a season or two here, and it's his forever home now. He loves it in Toronto. I know he doesn't play here anymore, but you get what get the point I'm making.
There's been plenty. Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's bullshit.
I think it's all bullshit too. Let's talk about some of the other moves that did happen. The Aaron Judge saga was hilarious. Like, so if you aren't on Twitter, here's the way things broke down with Aaron Judge. John Heyman tweets out Tuesday afternoon. This is the direct tweet. It said, Arson Judge is signing with the San Francisco Giants. So a bunch of people are quote tweeting the ever loving hell out of it because he tweeted Arson Judge is signing with the Giants. So he's a big insider. People take his reports as gospel. And then all of a sudden he has to delete that tweet because he spelled his name Arson, retweets it as Aaron Judge has informed the Giants he's choosing them. 30 minutes goes by. No one else has said a peep. And Heyman comes out and is like, my bad, guys. Jumped the gun a little. Not happening.
The funny thing is the corrected report from Heyman said that the Giants hadn't even heard from Judge. So basically all he was reporting was that they had tabled him an offer. which you're so far ahead of the gun there. It's nuts. But that was a fun 30 minutes where it was like, hey, you know what? The Yankees just lost their main guy after the best season, perhaps, by a Yankee in like 100 years. And he's walking out the door to go to California. But instead, unfortunately, what winds up happening is Aaron Judge signs the 9-year, $360 million deal. He bet on himself at the beginning of the year. Back in April, Brian Cashman came out on the first day of the season and he says, we offered Aaron Judge a contract, he turned it down. It was for, what was it, like 210, 230 mil kind of thing?
Yeah.
It wasn't.
And I remember calling him crazy. I was like, Aaron Judge, what are you going to do this year? You're often injured. You're an inconsistent power hitter coming off a bad year. I was like, Aaron Judge, what do you think you're going to do in the next season to earn that much more? Son of a bitch, he hit 60 home runs, or some people would say the MLB put more loaded baseballs into Yankees games, and that's why he hit the home runs. And regardless of how he did it, he earned himself over $100 million more than he would have signed for a year ago. And when the thing to the Giants came out, I always had a hard time believing he would leave New York because it would just be so unlike the New York Yankees to not just at the 12th hour when rubber hits the road, if Judge says the Giants are giving me $355 million. I said I'd be so unlike the Yankees not having to just be like, we'll match it or we're up in it. Yeah. What's it going to take? And at the end of the day, with 9 years, $360 million, they very clearly are just doing whatever it takes to keep him in pinstripes. But someone made the point to me of like, what if he didn't want to be a Yankee? What if the idea of getting relentlessly booed when you eventually go through a 12-game slump, what if all of that just isn't enticing and he'd rather go live back in California and be in a more relaxed environment, one that wants to win, one that's a great market, as we saw with the Giants when they won all those World Series. But what if he just doesn't want to be in New York, not even necessarily be a Yankee, but be surrounded by all that Yankee noise?
And there was all kinds of talk about that early in the offseason and during the playoffs when the Yankees wound up losing in the championship series to Houston. Was Judge was getting booed in the playoffs despite, putting up the 111 OPS. And I'm looking at his stats now. He didn't actually have a down year last year. He finished fourth in MVP voting in 2021. It was the COVID year where he really struggled through the injuries and it kind of looked like he wasn't going to be the guy. But I mean, since then, he proves that's the case. And even though he had that historically good, amazing season, Yankees fans still booed him. And you had to wonder if that rubs a guy the wrong way. But what winds up happening is they pay the cash to get it done. Now, from the other perspective of this, if Aaron Judge had walked and the Yankees didn't spend all that cash to keep him, would that not have opened the Yankees up then to sign maybe 2 or 3 or 4 different guys? Maybe you do like a Carlos Rodon and a
Carlos Correa
off season as well. That kind of thing. Like, is this maybe better for the Jays that they did keep him and didn't spend a whole bunch of money elsewhere? I don't know. I don't think he's hitting 60 dingers again. I'm digging for positives here.
Yeah, maybe they did overpay him.
Like,
he's damn good, but
he's fantastic. He turns 31 in April though. We'll see. And but it's kind of funny to think like this contract seems like so much money now, but maybe like you look at the way they've gone up in 5 years, maybe this looks like a bargain.
I was talking about this on one of the hockey pods I do, but it's so hilarious how from basically opening day until the end of the playoffs, what do we hear about the state of baseball and its economy?
Nobody watches it. No one likes it.
No one's watching it. No one likes it. Sport is dying. Attendance down. TV numbers down. Next TV deal will be less. All this stuff. And then Aaron Judge gets $360 million. And then Trey Turner gets $300 million. And Xander Bogaerts is getting almost $300 million. And they spend gobs of money every offseason. You're right. I think it's something where the narrative gets fed a lot that, oh yeah, baseball doesn't make a lot of money. It's dying, blah, blah, blah. And then this shit happens. And it makes me roll my eyes and be like, no, it's not dying. It's not going anywhere. Like, it's going to be fine.
It's fine. Like, yeah, you have the streaming services, Facebook and Google and Amazon wanting to host these games, paying millions upon tens of millions of dollars to do this.
Yeah.
And no, I think the sport's alive and well.
So we talked about Judge. What about Bogaerts? The Padres are spending like drunken sailors. I don't love this deal from a baseball perspective. I think he is a guy who he might age fine, but he won't age this well.
Really?
What do you think about Bogaerts?
I don't
you think
know.
it's a fair deal?
Do you think this is a loss for Boston, or do you think it's a win they didn't opt to give him that contract? I think
it's both. I think them losing Bogaerts is huge, but I just look at that deal San Diego gave him. I'm like, man, that's so much money.
It's a lot of money, but again, like just the way it's going up, it might not be that bad in a few years.
I keep forgetting that.
And then also the thing for them that makes this really interesting is now you have him and Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis, and it's like, is this just a contingency because Machado can opt out of his deal next winter, or is this like they are going to actively try to move on from or trade or do something with Tatis?
You would think they are, right?
You'd think, right?
That story, that narrative, his reputation, it's so shot.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like the fan base is fed up with him. The front office is clearly to an extent fed up with him.
They've got to be livid because, just for context for anyone who doesn't know, last winter he gets hurt in a motorbiking accident. That's what it was, right? He broke his hand or something like that. And then he's out for the first little bit of the season, and then he gets busted for PEDs as well. And he undergoes shoulder surgery while he's in his PED suspension. And this is after they just signed him to, how big was that contract? Like 14 years, 300 some odd mils?
It's stupid. It's so much.
Yeah, just an obscene amount of money. So the Padres have now gone ahead and done that. Also from Boston's perspective, this is the second time in 3 years they've lost a core player from that most recent 2018 World Series winning team. They wouldn't pay Mookie Betts. They traded him to the Dodgers. He's been fantastic since. Now Bogaerts is gone. Next winter, it's Rafael Devers, and there hasn't been a peep realistically about an extension there. Is he gone as well? Are the Red Sox no longer a free spending team?
Well, but then they go give the Yoshida, the latest free agent to come from overseas, they give him 5 years, 90 mil.
Yeah, and you don't want to pay Bogaerts, who has been around for a decade and has won with your team, and you're just willing to pay some random unproven guy on the international free agency money instead. And then you sign two relievers who are in their mid 30s or a combined 50 mils. You don't have enough for Bogaerts. I think it's weird personally.
The whole thing was weird. Yeah.
But then also, like, as we're shitting on the Red Sox, or I guess I'm shitting on the Red Sox for doing this, we haven't heard anything about Bo and Vlad extensions.
Concerning?
Maybe now that I've watched the Red Sox sort of allow this to happen. I don't know. If you had asked me 5 years ago, if in 2017, say, for example, when that core was kind of coming together, if you had asked me, do you think the Red Sox will allow Betts and Bogaerts to leave? I'd be like, no. So if you asked me a year or two ago, would I expect the Jays to do that with Bo and Vlad? I don't know. I don't know anymore. I'm not really sure what to expect. I expected differently when they signed Springer and they were signing Gausman, but I don't know. Maybe it's just this past week or so is kind of giving me a little sour taste. I'm probably overreacting, but such is life.
A nice little tie-in to our friends at PointsBet Canada, who are always updating their World Series odds for the upcoming season. The Red Sox all the way down at 33 to 1. That's even with teams like the Angels and the Texas Rangers. The Jays are still all the way up at 12 to 1, tied up with the Philadelphia Phillies, Astros, Dodgers, Braves, Yankees, Mets. That makes up your top five here. Mets giving Justin Verlander some big smoke as well. We didn't hit on that yet. That was another guy that we were thinking maybe the Jays would have interest in, but that's a lot of money to a 40-year-old pitcher.
But if there was anyone who will continue to be good into their 40s, it's stunning. It seemed, what was it, back in like 2014, 15, 16, those years with Detroit? He was washed. And then he just put together arguably his best season.
The magic fairy dust of the Houston Astros.
I cannot wrap my head around it. What are they doing? And will it continue when he leaves?
That's the big one for me, is will it continue when he leaves?
Or is he going to go Josh Reddick?
Just unplayable. They're paying him. That would be a very Mets thing for Verlander to become like unplayable.
Him and Scherzer, to combined age of 90, making $90 million together. And, who knows what the durability is like there. It's a pretty significant risk for the Mets to take. But I'll be honest with you, I'd have been all over it for the Jays.
That same deal?
Yes. Again, same.
You like spending their money, though.
I do. I love spending Rogers' money there.
And you're not the one who had to spend $300 million on a renovation, Coombsy.
Well, yeah, that's true. It's so hard being Rogers. I couldn't imagine being one of the telecom companies in this country. That must be so hard.
Should I let you go? No, I'm not. I'm going to cut you off. We're going to wrap up with a little bit more Jays talk here. News about the broadcast. We know Dan Shulman is coming as the full-time voice of the Toronto Blue Jays next year. We've known that for a bit. I love it. How can you not love it? He calls just an unbelievable game. He's lovable. He's not as old school as Buck and Pat were. He gives the broadcast a fresh voice, but we do know Pat Tabler will not be coming back. He and Sportsnet part ways. We don't know about Buck yet. I would love 162 games of Dan and Buck. I think they're a great duo together. It's a great balance, but there's also a part of me that goes, I wouldn't mind something totally fresh next to Dan.
Yeah, it wouldn't be overly surprising if Buck and Pat did move on in the same offseason, and the Blue Jays plan was, okay, Dan Shulman's kind of the epicenter of this broadcasting crew, and maybe we try a few different people out. They've had some different names in the mix. Joe Siddall is the one. He's been there for a while. He's quite likable. They've also had Ricky Romero. We mentioned him earlier. He's been doing podcasts and media stuff. He's been on the broadcast. Caleb Joseph's the
I
other
like
one.
him.
Yeah, he really endeared himself in the COVID year when they clinched the playoff spot, and he did that big talk with the beer, and it was very exciting. There's a lot of names in the mix. I'm not sure who will wind up on the broadcast, though.
Something so edgy about drinking a beer on TV.
That's fun. That's
People
cool.
love it.
That's what I like to see.
That's hashtag relatable.
I like that. That's what I like as an almost 30-year-old guy. That gets my blood pumping. I'm like, wow, that guy's drinking a beer on the television.
He shouldn't be doing that.
That could be me.
Like when athletes swear on live TV and it's like, oh, wow, they're so likable.
They're so relatable. It's just like me.
Just like us. Swearing on our podcast. All right, we're going to wrap this thing up. Well, we promise you we won't go a month in between episodes again here because the Jays are going to do something eventually and we're going to have to talk about it.
What if they do something tonight? It's Transaction Friday.
Just a news dump.
Well, it's like the Josh Donaldson trade back in the winter 2014.
Oh
that came at like 10 p.m. our time, so like midnight Eastern.
It was late.
Yeah, that was insane.
Ryu was late too.
Ryu was late too.
I remember, I was driving home from like a game somewhere. It was like 10, 11 o'clock Mountain Time, I want to say.
Did you win?
No, I don't remember. I think it was an Oilers game. Anyways.
Oh, it wasn't a Chiefs game.
It wasn't a beer league hockey game. No. What else? Tulo happened late, right?
Tulo happened late. Yeah. I was at a Boston Pizza after a slow pitch game.
Chapman happened very early.
I was in Brazil for that, so I don't remember what the time zones were.
I remember I woke up to the Chapman news, so it was early. Right. Yeah, well, maybe we will get something crazy this weekend and we'll have a new pod Monday.
It would be really funny after all of this bitching on my part that they're not going to do anything. They go make a fucking move this evening.
It like breaks now. But
I don't know if Ross Atkins is a late night trade kind of guy. I think he's an early morning rise and grind kind of guy.
Nah, he just never sleeps.
The grind never stops.
Grind never stops with Ross Atkins. All right, that's going to be a wrap on episode 123 of Blue Jays Nation Radio. Shout out to PointsBet Canada and our presenting sponsor, DoorDash. Remember that promo code, folks, GameDay25. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back soon with another Jays pod. Enjoy your holiday season.
Best wishes.